the winter seeding that we did. Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. We're going through this wonderfully crazy, ridiculously warm week here in April. But as I promised on the radio yesterday, we're going to have a look at our latest addition to the garden. The area around it is not landscaped at all, but we'll get to that. We're going to look at our willow tunnel that we ordered last fall from the Branch Ranch. Laura will put that information in the chat at some point, so you can connect with the Branch Ranch if you want. They're local. They're out Coburg way, but they grow willow rods, which is very uncommon. Even though we see them a lot in, cut, for cut winter arrangements and whatnot. Somebody growing willow rods around for fencing and willow weaving and stuff like that is quite rare. So the Branch Ranch has all that stuff.
They also do
courses and workshops on how to do these. We didn't go for the courses and workshops. We just said, give us a tunnel. We're gonna grow it. Can you get one of those rods, Laura, out of the bin over there? I don't think that. Oh no, I have one here. Never mind. Okay. So we put the basic parts together. Did it yesterday. Took an afternoon, a full afternoon, but that was okay. So here's where we're standing right now. We actually have our two walls in place, and what's amazing, when I put all the rods in the ground, I'm going to get a rod here. Here's the rods. This is what you start with. It's a piece of cut willow, cut on a very sharp angle, and it's just simply a cut rod. There's no roots on it or anything. That rooting's going to happen now that we've put it into the ground. And we're going to keep it well watered. We're going to mulch over the landscape fabric so the soil will never dry out there. And the willows are very quick and easy about rooting that way. When you go to take apart your winter containers, you're going to see that some of your willows have probably started to root. They can be transplanted out into the garden, and you can be quite successful in keeping those. So it's the same principle. These rods were cut, I think they cut these in the winter, sort of late winter. They cut them all, they size them, they bundle them up, they're ready to go. And this is what we start with. So this is about what are these, 8 feet? About 8-foot rods.
Closer to 10.
Yeah. They go into the ground about a foot or so, as far in as you can push them. Now we had a problem. I was going to build this last week, and my little tool to dig the hole wouldn't go in the ground more than about 4.5 inches because there was a layer of frost there. The layer of frost, surprisingly, even with these warm days, is still there, but I managed to get down deep enough to get the rods in place. So just quickly, and I'm not going to give you all the details because the Branch Ranch has some great videos on YouTube on how to build these things. We put a bundle of 3 rods in the corners, and then every foot we put an upright rod and 2 angled rods. And we work our way down. This is a 10-foot long tunnel. Then, once I did that, I had rods sticking out all funny different directions. But as you tie them together, you weave them together as well. So by weaving, so starting with an angled rod on the inside, it goes up and then up here comes through the outside, and then up here comes through the inside. So they stagger. And as you stagger those weavings of the rods, it strengthens up to look at what we ended up with. And this is just by weaving these rods together, they've already formed walls on their own. So I think that's really, really cool how that works. It's completely freestanding now. We're at a point now where we're not going to tie them up anymore. What you need to do at this point is you're thinking about arching them together so your height all of a sudden comes down quite low. Well, I could get through a tunnel this high, but I want people who are 6 feet tall to get through a tunnel this high. So I want to make my walls higher. So we're not going to connect the tops this year. Maybe in the fall. We're going to let the rods grow for the season, and then we'll connect them high up enough that most average people could walk through the tunnel without having to crouch. So that's about the stage we're at now. Actually, I'm going to bring the camera a little forward here. I'm going to get behind the camera for a second. Then I'm going to bring it up and just let you sort of see it from the side here, so you can kind of get an idea of how the weaving is happening. So everything is sort of crisscrossed, and then as it crisscrosses, it makes actually a neat pattern. But by weaving the rods in and out of each other as we go, it strengthens the walls, so the walls become freestanding. I wasn't actually really expecting that to happen, so I think it's pretty cool that the walls have sturdied up so much just from that little bit of action of weaving. So we're at a point now I can see, if I look down on the carpet, I can see that the raccoons have used it already. They've gone back and forth here overnight, so that's kind of funny. But stay tuned, we're going to follow this some more as we do some more weaving with it, maybe later on in the season, and can connect our top frames. So it's been a fun little project, much easier than I thought it was going to be. So give it a try. We're actually thinking about putting a small willow fence area in another part of the garden too, to continue a fence area that blocks one of the greenhouses. So we probably will tackle that as well. Another thing I wanted to show you today.
Question, Jay.
Quick question, yeah.
Paula would like to know, how tall will they grow?
Well, this particular variety, if you left it to grow, would grow into a tree. I forget which variety this is, Laura. Do you remember which? I don't remember which variety this is, but you know, how they grow these rods is very interesting. So you have the root plant growing, the willow plant growing, and every year they pollard it, or they cut all the branches off, so you have a stump. And then what willows will do, they will very quickly grow back from that stump with long, straight growth, and that's how you get these long rods. And because they have the stump is old and has a lot of energy in it, it'll send these rods up and it'll grow all this in one season. So when they cut these in the late winter, they start off with stumps, but now they're going to bud out and they're going to shoot up all kinds of long straight rods. So if you think that plant can grow 8-foot rods in one season, you can imagine it'll be a pretty big tree if you just let it go. So there will always be continuous pruning and weaving and building up of the branches on the tunnel. Once it's done, you can't just sit back and say it's done. Every year you're going to take branches and weave them into each other, and continue bulking up the walls of the tunnel, because they will keep getting bigger eventually. So that's good. That's a fun project. I'm glad we did it. So now we got to landscape the garden around it. But what I wanted to go, I don't know if you can turn that camera, it's a touch, Laura. If you remember, I think one of our first shows this year, we talked about seed sowing, and we talked about...
Two more. Can we go back to the
go
wheel?
back? Yeah, absolutely.
So Sophie would like to know how many rods and how long is each row.
Okay,
so this is a 10
this is a 10-foot long tunnel. So at every point we have, so in a 10-foot tunnel we have 12 points, right? Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
11.
We have 11 points at each, where each rod goes in.
70.
So we have, what's the math, Laura?
70 rods.
70 rods to make exactly what we've done here. Your spacing is every 12 inches. And at each 12 inches, you're putting 3 rods in. In each corner, you're putting 4 rods in. So pretty straightforward, easy going. The trick is getting the rods. If you've got some willows on your property, you can cut them down and let the stumps shoot up and maybe grow some of your own. But I thought the ones we got from the branch rants were very consistent, all about the same diameter, all about the same length, and were quite easy to use. So I was quite happy. Any other wall questions? We can always come back.
Yeah. No other questions.
Okay. Back in the beginning of the year, I think our first show, we talked about seed sowing. We talked about winter sowing of seeds. So winter sowing of seeds is not new. It has become very popular as people discover it. But winter sowing is a way of stratifying seeds. Now, many plants, you know, you can buy a packet of seeds, you can sprinkle them on a pot of soil, you water them, you keep them sort of warm, and they germinate and grow. Lots of plants do it that way. It's very easy. But there are quite a number of plants that need something else when they are wanting the seed to germinate. A lot of really interesting perennials, most trees and shrubs, all need something called stratification for the seed to germinate. So what is stratification? Stratification is providing the seed with a moist, cold period. Once the seed, germination inhibiting chemicals in the seed that allow it to not germinate until conditions are right. So you think perennials, for example, you know, a perennial will flower in the summer, it drops its seed. In the springtime, you see all kinds of little seedlings popping up. That's usually because the seed has gone through sort of the dry period where it's fallen onto the ground. In the autumn, you've got autumn rain. Then it gets a cold period through the winter. Then as the temperatures warm up in the spring, what you're replicating when you stratify seeds. And a lot of things need it to germinate at all. So we set up this box, this Rubbermaid box. Very simple. It's just a simple, well, sorry, it's not Rubbermaid, it's Sterilite. I shouldn't be using trade names for things that aren't it. And then we sowed a tray of seedlings, of seed. We leave it indoors for a few days so the seed absorbs moisture, and then we put it outside. And we did this in January. And now that we've had a few warm days, I'm going to bring this close to the camera here so we can see that we are getting a wonderful crop of silphium or cup plants, gilia, which is a wonderful hummingbirds, that's the thing, hummingbird plant. We've got Iliamna, some mountain hollyhocks. We've got Pusidanum, which is a cool plant for the garden. We did some Aquilesias, which often will germinate very well on their own indoors, but imagine what your seedlings would look like if you did these under lights indoors. When you do them outside, look at how compact and tough these seedlings are. Now, the other neat thing about this is because we've done them outside, when our weather turns colder again this week, we don't need to protect these seedlings. They're already hardy. You know, very different than if you took your seedlings from indoors and brought them outside to harden them off. There's no hardening off needed because as soon as they germinate, they are hardy and they can take frost and they can take cold, no problem. And they're very compact. They don't stretch. Look at the silphiums here. They're fantastic. Very tight. New leaf, first leaf coming out. Excellent. Almost ready for transplanting. Just to show you a couple of more examples. Here's a couple of more trays we did a couple of weeks later. And you can see we've got a wonderful crop of Amsonias coming up here. Hundreds of them. They wouldn't germinate if they were inside. And over here, these little grassy leaves. This is Tradescantia ohioensis, a wonderful native spiderwort that loves our dry, sandy conditions. Almost a little too well, but that's okay. And then over here, this is a wonderful one. This is a whole tray now. It's just germinating of Liatris ligula stylus. This is the one that gets covered in monarch butterflies in the late summer. They absolutely love this plant. And if you stratify the seeds, look at the seed germination you can get. Over here, we've got Lobelia syphilitica, which are so tiny you can't see them. They haven't quite germinated yet, but I'm sure they will in the next few days now that we have had some warmth. So that's what stratification can do for you. It can make easy plants easier to grow because you can keep them outside and you don't need to try to grow them indoors. And it can grow you species that might be difficult, and you can end up with lots and lots of plants. So it's a little late now to do this, but something to be thinking about for this winter. You can start sowing these seeds in November, December, January. Anytime you get the seeds from a seed exchange or a seed company or a seed collector, or even out of your own garden. If you sow them in December, you don't gain a lot by starting them early, but you have them outside where they can sort of cool naturally. The one thing that happened when we were doing these is that we sowed these, then we got a couple of ridiculously cold days for about a week. And I didn't want to put the seed out from the greenhouse, you know, 20 degrees in the greenhouse to minus 20 outside. That kind of fluctuation can be too much for them. So I waited till we had a bit of a mild spell, and then I put them outside, and then they chilled naturally. The pots froze, but that's why I keep them in these things, because they're outside. The pots can freeze. They freeze and thaw over the winter sometimes, and all that fluctuation in temperature and changes in the temperature helps those seeds to germinate. So you can see we've got some pretty choice plants coming along now from seed that we normally wouldn't be able to grow from seed. So
Sophie wants to know, would those be placed in a north location over the winter? And is the lid on tight?
Yeah, so when I put them out in this, I put the tray in here just like it was when I took it out. I put the tray in there, snap the lid on, and I put it outside somewhere where it can just get buried in snow. It does not need a sunny spot. Actually, a spot that's a little bit shaded is probably better because you don't get huge fluctuations. Imagine if this was sitting out even on a cold sunny day, it would act like a little greenhouse and could get very, very warm in there. And if that lasted for a few days, the seed might think it was time to germinate when in fact it's not. dappley shady spot in a cold frame, and then just sits there. Why I decided to put them into these boxes is because if mice are active through the winter, you don't want them getting into your seed trays and stirring stuff up. So this way they were watered, they were sealed, and yeah, it worked really, really well. I mean, even if you had a freezing garage with no heat, and just stack them in a garage, really, you could do it that way.
This week, Jeff, did you leave the lid off?
The lid's off now.
And will you put it on this week coming because it's going to be cold?
No. Now that germination has taken place, they will just sit out. No lid on them anymore. They don't need the high humidity of the lid being on them. They need fresh air. They're going to be in good light. They're going to be exposed to all the elements. I don't care if it snows on them now, because it won't hurt the seedlings. When they germinate like this, they are tough. They are perennial already, so it's a great way to do it.
Mary wants to know if she should cover up her hellebore buds that are growing now. She planted them 3 years ago, and this will be the first time that they will probably bloom, and she doesn't want them to die with the upcoming cold weather that we'll be getting in Zone 5.
If they
so should she cover them up with a clear plastic container?
No. You know what? Hellebores are like our flower bulbs in that respect, you know. Even if the tulips are coming, there's daffodils blooming now in our area. You know what? They might sulk a little bit, you know, if it gets really cold, but they'll bounce right back. So don't worry about it. The hellebores, this is when they bloom. They bloom extremely early. They're genetically used to that. So it's not going to cause them any problems. You're best just to leave them alone. Let them do what they want to do. We actually had hellebores pushing through snow with their flower buds, and they're in full bloom now. They look spectacular. So I wouldn't bother. You're probably more at risk of, you know, cooking them if they're in a covered container. So I would just leave them to the elements, and they should be fine. No worries. Any other questions, Laura?
That's the end of the questions.
All right. Thanks for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed. It's been. I really enjoyed doing it, even though it was a really hot day after yesterday, and I put it in. So it's going to be a fun little project. You'll probably see it more as we landscape the area around it. MasonHouseGardens.com. There is lots of really cool perennials, and I'm getting more and more of our really cool annual stuff up for pre-orders. For some of this unusual stuff that's coming up first on the website, I would consider placing an order. So, you know, we don't grow thousands of any one plant, so supplies are always limited. If you see something you like, order it. If something else comes up that you see that you want to add to an order, place a second order. We'll put them together, no worries. We still got a couple of spots left on our trips. If you want to join us, go to MasonHouseGardens.com. Click on Garden Tours. They're wonderful trips. They're there. We will very soon be posting our 2024 trips. And what else? Let's Get Growing on the radio. Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. CKDO, 1580 AM, 107.7 FM. If you missed the show, just go to ckdo.ca on Mondays, and they have a recorded version of Saturday's show up for a week after the show was on. So if you miss it, you got a week to catch up and get it. Other than that, we'll wrap it up for today, and we'll see you next Sunday on Let's Get Growing Facebook Live.